Young Sue's body had been dead for 3 years. No doctor, no pill, no woman could wake it up, until the Zambian dancer's accidental touch did what millions couldn't. Now the most dangerous mafia boss in Chicago has a secret that could destroy him. He can only function with her, and his enemies just found out. If they kill her, they don't just take his woman. They take back the one thing that makes him a man. Okay? Pause for a second and tell me. Where are you right now, and what are you doing while listening to this? Are you folding laundry in Atlanta, stuck in traffic in Manila, pretending to work from home in Toronto? Drop your city and what you're up to in the comments. I love knowing that these stories are keeping you company wherever you are. Now, let's get into it. The red curtain parted, and Young Sue's world tilted on its axis. He hadn't wanted to come to this underground club tonight. His second-in-command had insisted, saying he needed to relax after 3 weeks of brutal territory wars. But Young Sue knew the truth. Relaxation was a luxury men like him couldn't afford, especially broken men like him. The smoke hung thick in the air as bodies pressed against the stage, hungry eyes watching the dancer who emerged from behind the curtain. Young Sue sat in the darkest corner of the VIP section, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. He'd sat in clubs like this dozens of times before, watching women move, feeling absolutely nothing. His body had been dead below the waist for 3 years, ever since a rival boss had beaten him so badly that the doctors said the damage might be permanent. Might be. Those 2 words had cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills and specialist visits across 3 countries. Every doctor said the same thing. The injury to his spine had damaged the nerves. Pills didn't work. Injections didn't work. Nothing worked. Young Sue had stopped hoping and started accepting that he would never feel like a complete man again. But then, she moved. The dancer's skin was the color of warm honey, and when the lights hit her, she seemed to glow from within. Her dark eyes scanned the crowd with a mixture of determination and something else. Fear, maybe. Or sadness. She wasn't like the other dancers who worked this club. They moved with practiced seduction, knowing exactly how to make men open their wallets. This woman moved like she was dancing for herself, like she was somewhere far away from this dark basement in Chicago. Young Sue's chest tightened. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on her. She wore a simple outfit compared to the others. Dark blue that hugged her curves but didn't reveal everything at once. Her hair fell in long braids down her back, swaying as she turned. When she raised her arms above her head and arched her spine, something impossible happened. Heat flooded through Young Sue's body, pooling low in his stomach and traveling even lower. His breath caught. His heart began to pound. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. This couldn't be happening. This hadn't happened in 3 years, but his body was responding, waking up like a sleeping dragon, finally opening its eyes. The music ended, and the woman left the stage quickly. Not lingering for tips like the others did, Young Sue stood immediately, his legs slightly unsteady. He caught the attention of the club manager, a sweaty man named Pete, who knew better than to refuse Young Sue anything. That dancer, the one who just finished, I want a private session with her. Pete's eyes widened. Farai? Sir, she doesn't usually do private sessions. She only dances on stage. Young Sue pulled out a stack of bills that would cover the woman's salary for 3 months. Now she does. 10 minutes later, Young Sue stood outside a private room, his heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with danger or violence. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the door handle. What if the moment ended the second he walked inside? What if his body's response was just a fluke? A cruel joke his broken nerves were playing on him. He pushed the door open. She stood in the center of the small room, her arms wrapped around herself protectively. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Her eyes were large and expressive, framed by thick lashes. There was an innocence to her face that didn't belong in a place like this. You wanted to see me? Her voice was soft with an accent that made each word sound like music. Young-soo closed the door behind him and stood there studying her. The heat in his body hadn't faded. If anything, it was growing stronger. He could feel his pulse everywhere, could feel his body continuing to respond in ways he'd thought were lost forever. "Sit down," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. She hesitated, then moved to the small couch against the wall. Instead of sitting next to her, Young-soo took the chair across from her. He needed distance. He needed to understand what was happening to him. "What's your name?" "Farai." She pronounced it carefully. "It means happiness in my language." "Zambia?" Her eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, how did you know?" "I know a lot of things." Young-soo leaned back, trying to appear casual, even though his entire body was wound tight as a wire. "How long have you been in America?" 8 months. Her hands twisted in her lap. "I came to work to send money home to my mother. She's sick, and the hospitals in my country are very expensive." "And you ended up here." Farai's chin lifted slightly. "I dance. That's all. I don't do other things that some of the girls here do. Pete knows that. I made it clear when he hired me." Something about her fierce protectiveness of her boundaries made Young-soo's chest ache. "I'm not here for that." "Then why did you pay so much money just to talk to me?" "Good question." Young-soo didn't have a good answer. He couldn't exactly tell her that she was the first woman in 3 years to make his dead body come alive. She'd think he was insane. "You dance differently than the others." Farai blinked. "I don't understand. The other women dance for the men watching. You dance like you're trying to escape." Her breath caught, and he knew he'd struck truth. She looked away, her jaw tight. "Maybe I am." "From what?" "This life. This place. The way men look at me like I'm something they can buy." She met his eyes again, and there was fire in her gaze now. "I'm studying whenever I'm not working. I want to be a nurse. I want to help people. But that takes money and time, and right now I have neither." Young-soo found himself genuinely interested. When was the last time he'd cared about someone's story? When was the last time he'd had a conversation that wasn't about territory, money, or violence? "Tell me about Zambia." "Why do you care?" "Because I want to know." She studied him suspiciously, but then she began to talk. She told him about growing up in Lusaka, about helping her mother in their small shop, about the Victoria Falls, and how the mist would create rainbows in the morning light. She told him about her best friend from childhood, about learning English in school, about the day she received her acceptance letter from a nursing program in America and cried because she had no way to pay for it. Young-soo listened to every word. He asked questions. He found himself almost smiling when she described her first winter in Chicago and how she'd never seen snow before and thought she was going to freeze to death. "You have a beautiful smile," she said suddenly, then looked shocked that she'd spoken the words out loud. "I mean, you should smile more. You look very serious all the time." "I don't have much to smile about." Everyone has something to smile about. Even in the darkest times, there's always a small light somewhere. Her optimism should have annoyed him. Young-soo lived in a world where optimism got you killed. But coming from her, it felt genuine, not naive. They talked for over an hour. Young-soo told her things he never told anyone, about feeling trapped in a life he hadn't chosen, about the weight of expectations, about loneliness that money couldn't fix. He didn't tell her about the Mafia or his broken body, but he told her enough that she began to see him as human, not just another customer with cash. "I should get back," Farai said finally, glancing at the clock on the wall. "Pete will wonder what we're doing in here for so long." She stood, and Young-soo stood with her. As she moved past him toward the door, her hand accidentally brushed against his. It was barely a touch, skin against skin for just a second. Electricity exploded through Young-soo's entire body. His breath stopped. His vision actually blurred for a moment. The sensation was so intense, so overwhelming, that he grabbed the back of the chair to steady himself. "Are you okay?" Farai's hand was on his arm now, her face worried. "You look pale. Should I call someone? Young-soo stared down at where her fingers pressed against his sleeve. He could feel the warmth of her touch through the fabric. He could feel everything. His body was screaming at him, demanding things it hadn't demanded in 3 years. I'm fine. His voice came out hoarse, but he wasn't fine. He was terrified and thrilled and confused all at once. When Farai removed her hand, the loss of contact felt like being plunged into cold water. "Thank you for talking with me," she said softly. It was nice to have a real conversation with someone. Most men who come here just want to look or touch. You actually listened. She opened the door and slipped out before Young-soo could find his voice again. He stood alone in the private room, his heart racing, his body alive in ways he'd thought were impossible. He'd spent 3 years visiting the best doctors in the world. He'd tried every treatment, every medication, every therapy. Nothing had worked, but 5 minutes of this woman's accidental touch had done what millions of dollars couldn't do. Young-soo pulled out his phone and called Pete, the dancer Farai. "I want her schedule. Every day she works, I want that private room reserved for me." "Sir, that's going to be expensive. She works 5 nights a week. I don't care what it costs. Make it happen." He ended the call and stood there in the empty room, still feeling the ghost of her touch on his hand. Young-soo had built an empire through violence and fear. He'd survived assassination attempts, territory wars, and betrayals. But this fragile dancer from Zambia had just accomplished something no one else could. She'd made him feel human again. She'd made him feel like a man. And Young-soo knew with absolute certainty that he would do whatever it took to feel that way again, even if it meant entering dangerous territory, even if it meant risking the careful walls he'd built around his heart. He walked out of the club into the rainy Chicago night, and for the first time in 3 years, Young-soo felt something close to hope burning in his chest. Tomorrow night, he would come back. And the night after that, and every night until he understood what power this woman held over his broken body. Behind him, through the club's tinted windows, Farai watched him leave. She pressed her hand against the glass, her heart beating strangely fast. She didn't know who that man was or why his sadness had touched something deep inside her. But she knew she'd see him again. Something about the way he'd looked at her promised that their story had only just begun. Farai's hands shook as she applied her makeup in the small dressing room she shared with 3 other dancers. It had been exactly 7 days since the man named Young-soo first walked into her life, and he'd returned every single night since then. The other girls had noticed. "Your private client is here again," Jasmine said, her voice dripping with jealousy. She was the club's top earner, or at least she had been until Young-soo started paying a fortune just to occupy Farai's time. "What exactly are you doing in that room with him? He stays for hours." "We just talk," Farai said quietly, focusing on her reflection in the mirror. Jasmine laughed, a harsh sound. "Nobody pays that much money just to talk, honey. Pete says he's spending more in a week than most clients spend in a year." Farai didn't respond. How could she explain that they really did just talk? That Young-soo would arrive exactly at 9 o'clock, wait for her to finish her stage performance, and then they'd disappear into the private room where they'd sit and share stories about their lives. She'd learned that he was born in Seoul but moved to America when he was 15, that his favorite food was his grandmother's kimchi stew, that he read poetry late at night when he couldn't sleep, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a knife fight he wouldn't elaborate on. He'd learned that she missed the sound of African rain on tin roofs, that she called her mother every Sunday morning, that she was afraid of dogs but loved cats, that her biggest dream was to open a free clinic in Zambia one day. But there was something else happening between them, something neither of them acknowledged out loud. The air in that small room grew thicker every night. Young-soo's eyes followed her movements with an intensity that made her skin feel too hot. When she laughed, he leaned closer like he wanted to capture the sound. When their hands accidentally touched, which happened more frequently now, electricity sparked between them. Farai finished her makeup and headed to the stage. The crowd was bigger tonight, rowdier. She spotted young Sue in his usual corner, dressed in an expensive black suit that probably cost more than everything she owned. His eyes locked on her the moment she appeared, and her stomach flipped. She danced, but she danced for him now. Every movement was a conversation between their bodies. When she turned, she made sure he saw the curve of her hip. When she arched her back, she heard his sharp intake of breath even over the music. This was dangerous, this game they were playing, but Farai couldn't seem to stop herself. The music ended and she hurried off stage, her heart pounding. Within minutes, she was in their private room, and young Sue entered right behind her. But tonight felt different. He closed the door and didn't move to his usual chair. Instead, he stood there, his dark eyes burning with something that made Farai's breath catch. "You danced differently tonight," he said, his voice low and rough. "Did I?" She tried to sound casual, but her voice trembled. "You know you did." He took a step closer. "You danced for me." Farai's back pressed against the wall. "Maybe I did." Young Sue stopped just inches from her. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Her breasts rose and fell with rapid breaths, and she saw his eyes track the movement. "This is a bad idea," he said, but his hand came up to touch her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline. "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Because once I start touching you, I won't be able to stop." Farai's body ached in ways she'd never experienced. She'd been kissed before, had dated boys back home, but nothing had prepared her for this overwhelming need. "Then don't stop." Young Sue's control shattered. His mouth crashed against hers, and Farai gasped at the intensity. This wasn't a gentle first kiss. This was 3 years of hunger, 7 nights of restraint, and a desperate need colliding all at once. His hands tangled in her braids, tilting her head back so he could deepen the kiss. His tongue swept against hers, claiming and demanding, and Farai responded with equal passion. Her hands clutched his suit jacket, pulling him closer even though there was no space left between them. She could feel every hard plane of his body pressed against her softer curves. She could feel exactly how much he wanted her, and the knowledge made her moan into his mouth. "Farai," he groaned against her lips. "Tell me to stop. Tell me this is wrong." "I can't," she breathed. "I don't want you to stop." Young Sue's hands moved to her waist, his fingers pressing into her skin through the thin fabric of her costume. "I need to tell you something. Before this goes any further, you need to know." Farai's mind was fuzzy with desire, but she forced herself to focus. "What?" He pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged. "I was injured 3 years ago. The doctors said I might never be able to be with a woman normally again. They said the damage was too severe, that I'd need medication, and even then, it might not work." Farai's hands moved to frame his face. "But it works with me." "Yes." His eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Only with you. I don't understand it. I've seen dozens of doctors, tried everything. But the moment you touched my hand that first night, my body woke up. You fixed something inside me that everyone else said was permanently broken." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Farai understood now why he kept coming back, why he looked at her like she was a miracle. But she also understood something else. This wasn't just physical for her. Somewhere over the past week, she'd started falling for this complicated, damaged man. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know you're someone powerful. I see how people look at you, how they fear you. I don't know what you do for work, but I know it's dangerous." "I can't promise you safety," young Sue said, his forehead pressing against hers. "But I can promise I'll protect you with everything I have." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." Before Farai could respond, the door burst open. 3 men rushed into the room, and young Sue immediately pushed Farai behind him. The men weren't customers. They wore matching leather jackets with a red dragon symbol on the back, and they carried guns. "Well, well," the leader sneered, "the mighty Young Soo, hiding in a strip club with his little toy." Young Soo's entire demeanor changed. The vulnerable man who'd been kissing her moments ago disappeared, replaced by someone cold and lethal. "You made a mistake coming here, Trent. Your territory's shrinking, Young Soo. Maybe it's time you remembered who really runs the South Side." Everything happened fast. Trent raised his gun, but Young Soo moved faster. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted hard, and the gun clattered to the floor. The other two men rushed forward. Young Soo fought like a trained warrior, his movements precise and brutal. But one of the men pulled a knife. "Young Soo, watch out!" Farai screamed. He turned, but not fast enough. The knife slashed across his ribs, and blood bloomed across his white shirt. Young Soo barely flinched. He grabbed the attacker's arm, broke it with a sickening crack, and threw him into the wall. Within seconds, all three men were on the ground, groaning in pain. Young Soo grabbed Farai's hand. "We need to leave, now." They ran through the club's back exit, emerging into a dark alley. Young Soo's hand pressed against his bleeding side, but he didn't slow down until they were blocks away. "Your apartment," he gasped. "Take me there." Farai's apartment was tiny, barely more than a single room with a bathroom, but it was clean and safe. She helped Young Soo inside, her hands shaking as she locked the door behind them. "Sit down. Let me see how bad it is." Young Soo lowered himself onto her small couch, and Farai carefully peeled his ruined shirt away from the wound. The cut was long but not deep, bleeding steadily but not dangerously. She grabbed her first aid kit and some clean towels. "This might hurt," she warned. "I've had worse." As Farai cleaned the wound, her hands gentle on his skin, the intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. Here, in her small space, with his blood on her hands, they crossed another invisible line. "You saved my life," Young Soo said softly. "If you hadn't warned me, that knife would have gone into my heart instead of just cutting my side. I couldn't let them hurt you." His hand caught hers, stilling her movements. "Farai, I need to be honest with you about who I am. I already know you're someone dangerous. I run the Korean Mafia's operations in Chicago," he said bluntly. "I control territory, collect debts, and make deals that most people would call criminal. Those men tonight were from a rival organization. This won't be the last time someone tries to hurt me. Anyone close to me becomes a target." Farai should have been terrified. She should have asked him to leave and never come back. Instead, she continued bandaging his wound. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what I feel for you is real. Because I want you more than I've wanted anything in my life. But I won't lie to you about the risks." She finished wrapping the bandage and sat back. Young Soo's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I should tell you to leave," Farai whispered. "I should be smart and protect myself." "Yes, you should. But I can't." She climbed onto his lap carefully, avoiding his injured side. "Because I feel it too, this thing between us. It's bigger than logic or safety." Young Soo's hands gripped her hips. "If we do this, there's no going back." "Then don't let me go back." She kissed him, and this time it was her leading, her claiming. Young Soo groaned, his hands sliding under her shirt to feel her bare skin. Farai's fingers worked at his belt, her body aching with need. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice strained. "I've never been more sure of anything." Young Soo stood with her in his arms, ignoring his injury. He carried her to the small bed in the corner, laying her down gently. His hands removed her clothes, slowly, reverently, like he was unwrapping something precious. When she lay bare before him, his eyes traveled over every inch of her with such intensity that she felt worshipped. "You're so beautiful," he breathed. "So perfect." Farai reached for him, helping him remove the rest of his clothes. When their skin finally met with nothing between them, they both gasped. Young-Soo's body responded perfectly, eagerly, proving once again that she was his cure. He entered her slowly, carefully, his eyes locked on hers. Farai's back arched, her body welcoming him, adjusting to the stretch and fullness. Young-Soo groaned, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. "You feel incredible," he whispered. "So tight, so perfect. I've dreamed about this every night." They moved together, finding a rhythm that felt ancient and new all at once. Young-Soo's hands were everywhere, touching, claiming, memorizing. Farai wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, wanting everything he could give her. The pleasure built between them, spiraling higher with each thrust. "Young-Soo!" she gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders. "Don't stop, please don't stop." "Never," he promised against her neck. "I'll never stop wanting you." When they finally shattered together, it felt like the entire world exploded into light. Farai cried out his name, her body clenching around him as waves of pleasure crashed through her. Young-Soo followed seconds later, groaning deeply as he spilled inside her, marking her as his in the most primitive way. They lay tangled together afterward, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Young-Soo's fingers traced lazy patterns on her skin, and Farai felt tears slip down her cheeks. "What's wrong?" Young-Soo asked, his voice concerned. "I'm falling in love with you," she admitted, "and it terrifies me." Young-Soo rolled them so she was tucked against his uninjured side, her head resting on his chest. "I know, because I'm falling too. What are we going to do?" "I don't know, but we'll figure it out together." Outside, Chicago's night continued, full of danger and darkness. But in that small apartment, two broken souls had found something worth fighting for. Neither of them knew that in just a few weeks, their worlds would collide in ways that would change everything forever. 2 months later, Farai stood in the bathroom of the luxury apartment Young-Soo had insisted on renting for her, staring at 3 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the marble counter. This couldn't be happening. Her hands shook as she picked up each test, hoping somehow she'd read them wrong. But the results were clear. 2 pink lines, a plus sign, the word pregnant in digital letters. Farai's legs gave out and she sank to the floor, her back against the cold bathtub. How could this have happened? They'd been careful. Well, mostly careful. There had been that night 3 weeks ago when Young-Soo had shown up at 2 a.m, bleeding from a fight, and they'd made love urgently against the front door, too desperate for each other to think about protection. Or the time in his car parked overlooking Lake Michigan, when neither of them could wait until they got home. Or the morning in his office at one of his legitimate businesses, when he'd bent her over his desk and made her scream his name while his employees worked just outside the door. Farai dropped her head into her hands. She'd quit dancing at the club the day after that first night together. Young-Soo had been adamant that she never go back there, that he'd take care of all her expenses. She'd resisted at first, not wanting to be dependent on any man, but he'd convinced her by enrolling her in an accelerated nursing program, paying her tuition in full, and setting up an account that sent money to her mother in Zambia every month. "Let me take care of you," he'd said. "Let me give you the life you deserve while you chase your dreams." And she'd let him. For 2 months, Farai had lived in a bubble of passionate romance and domestic bliss. Young-Soo spent every night at her apartment, holding her while they slept, making love to her multiple times a day like he couldn't get enough. They cooked together, watched movies, talked for hours about everything and nothing. She'd started to believe they could make this work despite his dangerous lifestyle. She'd started to hope for a future together, but a baby changed everything. The apartment door opened and Farai's heart jumped. Young-Soo had a key and came and went as he pleased. She quickly gathered the pregnancy tests and shoved them into her robe pocket, but she wasn't fast enough. "Farai?" Young-Soo appeared in the bathroom doorway, concern etched on his handsome face. "What's wrong? You look pale." "Nothing. I'm fine." He didn't believe her. Young-soo moved closer, his experienced eyes taking in her tear-stained face, her trembling hands, her defensive posture on the bathroom floor. "Tell me what happened. Did someone threaten you? Did one of my enemies contact you?" "No, nothing like that." "Then what?" He knelt beside her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Talk to me." Farai's resolve crumbled. She pulled the pregnancy tests from her pocket and held them out wordlessly. Young-soo stared at them for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Farai's tears fell faster. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know this complicates everything. I'll figure something out. I'll go back to Zambia. You don't have to be involved if you don't want to be." "Stop talking." Farai's mouth snapped shut. Young-soo took the tests from her hand, examining each one carefully. Then, to her complete shock, his face broke into the most genuine smile she'd ever seen on him. "You're pregnant," he said, wonder in his voice. "You're carrying my baby." "Yes, but I understand if you're angry, or if you want me to leave, or—" Young-soo dropped to his knees fully and pressed both hands against her still flat stomach. "Farai, do you understand what this means?" "The doctors told me I'd never be able to have children. They said the injury damaged more than just my ability to be with a woman. They said even if I could perform, my chances of ever fathering a child were almost zero." Farai's breath caught. "I didn't know. I've made peace with never being a father. I've accepted that my bloodline would end with me." His eyes met hers, shining with unshed tears. "But you changed that. You've given me everything I thought I'd lost. You made my body work again. You made me feel like a man again. And now you're giving me a child." "So you're not angry?" "Angry?" Young-soo laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I'm terrified and thrilled and overwhelmed, but angry, never." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Farai. I should have said it before now, but I love you more than I knew it was possible to love anyone." Fresh tears spilled down Farai's cheeks, but these were happy tears. "I love you too. So much it scares me." Young-soo kissed her deeply, his hands cradling her face like she was made of glass. When he pulled back, his expression had turned serious. "I need to keep you both safe. My world is dangerous, and now you're not just a target because you're with me. You're carrying the heir to everything I've built." "What does that mean?" "It means we need to be more careful. I'll increase security. You can't go anywhere alone anymore. And we need to think about the future, about what kind of life we want this child to have." Over the next few weeks, Farai's body began to change. Her breasts grew tender and fuller. Morning sickness hit her like a truck. And she spent the first hour of every day with her head in the toilet. Young-soo held her hair back, rubbed her back, and brought her crackers and ginger tea. Their physical relationship intensified in ways Farai hadn't expected. Young-soo touched her constantly, his hands drawn to her stomach, even though there was no visible bump yet. He made love to her more gently now, treating her like she might break, which frustrated Farai because her hormones made her want him more aggressively than ever. "I won't hurt you or the baby," he insisted one night when she tried to climb on top of him. "The baby is the size of a grape," Farai countered, pushing him onto his back. "You're not going to hurt anything. Now stop treating me like I'm fragile and make love to me properly." Young-soo's control snapped, and he flipped their positions, pinning her wrists above her head. "You want it properly? Then I'll give it to you properly." He took her hard and deep, the way she'd been craving, and Farai's pleasure-filled cries echoed through the apartment. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Young-soo's hand rested possessively on her stomach. "I want to marry you," he said suddenly. Farai's heart stuttered. "What?" "Not some big wedding, just us making it official. I want you to be my wife. I want our child to have my name." "Young-soo, we've only known each other for 3 months. I don't care. I knew after 1 week that you were mine. This just makes it more important that we make it legal, that I can protect you both under my name." Before Farai could respond, young Sue's phone rang. He answered it, his expression darkening as he listened. When he hung up, all the softness had left his face. "What's wrong?" "My family in Korea found out about you, about the baby." He stood, pacing the room. "My second in command, Dae-young, he's been reporting back to them. He thinks he's being loyal to my father, but he's put you in danger." "How did they find out?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is they're not happy. My father has been demanding I come home for months to take over the family's operations there and marry the woman they chose for me years ago. I've been refusing, making excuses. But now that they know about you and the baby, they're going to push harder." Farai stood, wrapping her arms around her middle protectively. "What are you going to do?" Young-soo pulled her close, his arms tight around her. "I'm going to choose you, both of you. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to give up, I'm choosing our family." "But they're your blood family. And you're carrying my child. You're my future. They represent my past, a life I never wanted." He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "I'll handle this. Trust me." Over the next week, young Sue became distant, taking phone calls at all hours and disappearing for meetings he wouldn't explain. Farai felt him pulling away, and it terrified her. Late at night, when he thought she was sleeping, she'd hear him on the phone speaking rapidly in Korean, his voice tense and angry. One night, Farai woke to find the bed empty beside her. She found young Sue standing on the balcony in just his boxers, despite the cold Chicago night. She wrapped a blanket around herself and joined him. "You're going to freeze," she said softly. "I can't feel the cold." He didn't look at her. "Farai, my family is demanding I come home. They've given me an ultimatum. Come back to Korea, marry the woman they chose, and take my proper place in the family business, or they'll cut me off completely and consider me a traitor." "What does that mean exactly? Being cut off?" "It means they'll declare open season on me. Every rival gang in Chicago will know I no longer have my family's protection. It means war, constant attacks, danger following us everywhere." Farai's hand moved to her growing belly. "Then go. Go back to Korea. I'll take the baby and go home to Zambia. We'll be safe there, and you can have the life your family wants for you." Young Sue spun to face her, his eyes blazing. "Is that what you think I want? To abandon you and our child for some arranged marriage and a life I despise? I think you're trapped between two impossible choices, and I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart." "You're not the reason." He pulled her against him fiercely. "You're the only good thing I've ever had. The only pure, honest, beautiful thing in my entire dark existence. I'd burn my father's empire to the ground before I'd give you up." Young Sue... "No, listen to me." His hands framed her face. "Tomorrow we're leaving Chicago. I have a place in Seattle that nobody knows about, not even Dae-jung. We're going to disappear for a while just until I figure out how to handle this situation without putting you and the baby at risk." "You're running away from your family?" "I'm protecting mine." His hand moved to her stomach. "This is my family now. You and this baby, everything else is just business." That night, they made love with desperate urgency, knowing their time in Chicago was ending. Young Sue took her slowly, his eyes locked on hers, his hands everywhere, memorizing every curve and response. When they finally collapsed together, exhausted and satisfied, Farai pressed her hand over his heart. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, you won't regret choosing us." Young Sue's arms tightened around her. "The only thing I'd ever regret is letting you go." But as Farai drifted to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that their happiness was about to shatter. Somewhere in Korea, young Sue's family was making plans, and in Chicago, enemies were circling, sensing weakness. The storm was coming, and all they could do was hold each other tighter and hope their love was strong enough to survive it. The house in Seattle sat on a cliff overlooking the Puget Sound, isolated and beautiful. Farai stood on the deck, watching the water change colors as the sun set, one hand resting on her growing belly. At 4 months pregnant, she finally had a visible bump, and she'd caught young Sue staring at it constantly with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. They'd been in Seattle for 6 weeks, and it had been the most peaceful time of Farai's life. Young Sue had truly stepped away from his Chicago operations, delegating everything to his lieutenants. Here, he wasn't a feared Mafia boss. He was just a man preparing to become a father. They'd turned one of the bedrooms into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow since they'd decided to wait to learn the baby's gender. Young Sue had assembled the crib himself, cursing in Korean when the instructions didn't make sense, making Farai laugh until her sides hurt. Every night he'd press his ear against her belly, talking to their baby in a mixture of Korean and English. "Your mother is the strongest woman I've ever met," he'd say softly. "You're lucky to have her, and I promise I'll spend every day of my life making sure you both know how loved you are." In the mornings, Farai attended her online nursing classes while young Sue cooked breakfast. He was surprisingly good in the kitchen, making traditional Korean dishes that Farai had learned to love. In the afternoons, they'd walk along the private beach below the house, talking about names and parenting styles in the future. At night, their passion hadn't dimmed. If anything, Farai's pregnancy had intensified her desire. Young Sue worshipped her changing body, his hands and mouth exploring every new curve. He'd make love to her with reverent slowness, telling her how beautiful she was, how much he loved seeing her body grow with their child. "You're glowing," he'd whisper against her skin. "So gorgeous, so perfect. Carrying my baby looks so good on you." Farai had never felt more desired, more cherished, more loved. She'd started to believe they really could have this life, that they'd escape the darkness of young Sue's past. But paradise never lasts forever. Farai was making dinner one evening when the security alarm blared. Young Sue immediately pushed her behind him, his hand reaching for the gun he now kept in every room. "Stay here," he ordered. But Farai followed him to the front door, peeking around his shoulder. A black SUV sat in the driveway, and a man in an expensive suit was climbing out. Young Sue's entire body tensed. "Dae-jung." The man bowed respectfully, but Farai could see the calculation in his eyes. "Boss, we need to talk." "How did you find this place?" "You trained me too well." Dae-jung's gaze slid to Farai, lingering on her pregnant belly. "So the rumors are true. Congratulations." Young Sue stepped outside, closing the door behind him to keep Farai protected. But she pressed against it, listening through the wood. "Your father sent me," Dae-jung said. "He wants you to come home. The situation in Chicago is deteriorating without you. The Hernandez family has taken over 3 of your territories. Your legitimate businesses are being investigated by the FBI. Everything you built is falling apart. Then let it fall. I'm done with that life. You can't just walk away. Your father won't allow it, and neither will the other families." Dae-jung's voice hardened. "They've found out about the woman and the baby. They see it as a weakness, proof that you've gone soft. There's a price on both their heads now." Farai's blood ran cold. Through the door, she heard young Sue's deadly quiet voice. "Who put the hit out? Does it matter? There are 5 different organizations that want to hurt you through her. You know how this works. You've used the same tactic yourself. That was before." "Before what? Before you fell in love?" "That doesn't change the reality of your situation." Dae-jung sighed. "Come home, young Sue. Marry Sun-hee like your father wants. We'll pay off the woman, set her up somewhere safe with the baby. You can even visit them if you're discreet." The sound of flesh hitting flesh made Farai jump. She opened the door to see Dae-jung on the ground, blood streaming from his nose, and young Sue standing over him with murder in his eyes. "Her name is Farai. She's not the woman. She's the mother of my child, and if you ever disrespect her again, I'll kill you myself." Dae-jung stood slowly, wiping blood from his face. "You're making a mistake. Your father won't accept this. Neither will the other families. They'll come for all of you. Then let them come. I'll be ready. Will you? Daijung looked at Farai, his expression almost pitying. Can you protect her and the baby while fighting off multiple enemies? Can you live with yourself if something happens to them because you were too stubborn to make the smart choice? Young-Soo's jaw clenched. Farai could see the conflict raging inside him, the terrible weight of the decision he was facing. Get out, Young-Soo said quietly, and tell my father I said to go to hell. Daejung left, but the damage was done. The bubble of safety had burst. That night, Young-Soo barely spoke. He increased the security around the house, made dozens of phone calls, and sat up late staring at nothing. Farai found him on the deck at 3 a.m, his shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. Talk to me, she said softly, wrapping her arms around him from behind. I can't protect you here. Not from everyone who's coming. Then what do we do? Young-Soo turned, pulling her into his arms, his hand splayed across her pregnant belly. I don't know. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. Every option puts you and the baby at risk. Maybe Daejung was right. Maybe you should go back. No. His arms tightened around her. I'm not leaving you. Then I'll leave. I'll take the baby back to Zambia where your enemies can't find us. You can finish whatever you need to finish with your family, and then come find us when it's safe. You think I could live knowing you're halfway across the world carrying my child without my protection? Young-Soo's voice broke. You think I could sleep at night wondering if you're safe? Then we're trapped. Yes. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, feeling the walls closing in. Inside the house, the baby kicked for the first time, and Farai gasped. Did you feel that? She grabbed Young-Soo's hand, pressing it against her belly. Another kick, stronger this time. Young-Soo's eyes filled with tears. Our baby is a fighter, just like us. Young-Soo dropped to his knees, pressing his face against Farai's stomach. I promise you, he whispered to their unborn child. I promise I'll keep you safe, both of you, whatever it takes. But that night, as they made love with desperate tenderness, both of them felt the approaching storm. Young-Soo took his time, memorizing every sound Farai made, every place that made her gasp, every expression of pleasure that crossed her face. Farai held him tightly, afraid that if she let go, he might disappear. I love you, she whispered as they moved together. No matter what happens, I need you to know that you've given me more happiness than I ever dreamed possible. Don't talk like that, Young-Soo said roughly. Don't talk like we're ending. I'm not. I'm just making sure you know. They climaxed together, holding each other so tightly it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Afterward, Young-Soo wrapped Farai in his arms and made a silent vow. He would fix this. He would find a way to give her and their baby a safe life, even if it cost him everything. The next morning, Farai woke to find Young-Soo packing a bag. What are you doing? I'm going back to Chicago. I'm going to end this, negotiate with the other families. Make sure they understand you and the baby are off limits. And if they won't negotiate? Young-Soo's expression was cold. Then I'll remind them why people fear me in the first place. Don't go. Farai's hand moved to her belly. Please stay with us. I'm doing this for us. He crossed to her, kissing her deeply. I'll be back in 3 days. I've arranged for private security to watch the house. Don't leave for any reason. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Young-Soo, I love you, both of you. Remember that. He left before Farai could argue further. She stood at the window, watching his car disappear down the driveway, a terrible feeling settling in her chest. 3 days passed with no word from Young-Soo. Farai called his phone constantly, but it went straight to voicemail. The security guards assured her this was normal, that Young-Soo was probably in meetings and couldn't be disturbed. But on the 4th day, Daejung returned. Where is he? Farai demanded before Daejung could speak. Alive, for now. Dae-jung's expression was grim. He went to Chicago and declared war on 3 families at once. He's barricaded himself in his penthouse with a dozen men. The other families have the building surrounded. It's a standoff. Farai's knees buckled. He's going to get himself killed. Yes, unless you convince him to stand down. Why would he listen to me? Because you're the only thing he cares about more than his pride. Dae-jung held out a phone. Call him. Tell him to surrender, to negotiate. Tell him the baby needs a father, not a dead hero. Farai took the phone with shaking hands. When Young-soo answered, the sound of his voice made her sob. Farai, baby, are you okay? Am I okay? You left to protect us, and instead you're getting yourself killed. I'm handling it. By starting a war? That's your solution? Farai's free hand pressed against her belly. Your baby is moving inside me right now. Do you want to meet them, or do you want to die in some pointless fight? Silence stretched between them. Finally, Young-soo spoke, his voice rough. I'm trying to make the world safe for both of you. The world will never be completely safe, but our baby needs a father. I need you. Come back to us. We'll figure out another way. Farai, please, I'm begging you, come home. More silence. Then, I love you. Tell our baby I love them too. The line went dead. Farai screamed in frustration, throwing the phone. Dae-jung caught it, his expression sympathetic. He's not going to surrender, is he? Farai asked. No, he's going to fight until they kill him or he wins. That's who he is. Farai sank onto the couch, her hands cradling her belly. Inside her, the baby kicked again, as if sensing her distress. She'd thought love would be enough to change Young-soo, to pull him away from violence. But maybe some men were too broken, too hardened by their past to ever truly escape it. All she could do now was wait and pray that the father of her child would survive to meet them. The standoff in Chicago lasted 2 more days before everything exploded. Farai was in Seattle, 7 months pregnant now, her belly so large she could barely see her feet. She'd been living in a constant state of terror, jumping at every sound, checking her phone obsessively for news from Young-soo. When her phone finally rang at 3 a.m, she answered before the first ring finished. Farai? It was Dae-jung, and his voice carried urgency. Young-soo negotiated a temporary truce. He's flying back to Seattle tonight. But the other families aren't satisfied. They're sending representatives to meet with him tomorrow, and their terms won't be pretty. Is he hurt? Bruised and exhausted, but alive. He'll be there in 4 hours. Farai paced the house until she heard Young-soo's car in the driveway. She rushed to the door, and when she saw him, her heart broke. He had a black eye, split lip, and moved like his ribs were bruised, but he smiled when he saw her. Look at you, he said softly, his hands immediately going to her huge belly. You're so beautiful. Don't you dare try to distract me with compliments. Farai's eyes filled with tears. You look terrible. I've looked worse. Young-soo pulled her into his arms carefully, mindful of her belly between them. I'm sorry I worried you. Worried? I thought you were going to die. I thought our baby would grow up without knowing their father. That's not going to happen. I promise. They went inside, and Farai insisted on cleaning Young-soo's wounds despite his protests. As her hands gently tended to his injuries, the intimacy of the moment reminded them both of that first night in her tiny Chicago apartment, when everything had started. What happened in Chicago? Farai asked. I made some deals, called in some favors, reminded certain people why crossing me is a bad idea. Young-soo winced as she dabbed antiseptic on his split lip. The families have agreed to a meeting tomorrow. They'll present their terms for leaving you and the baby alone. What kind of terms? I don't know yet, but whatever they want, I'll give it to them if it means keeping you both safe. That night, they lay in bed together, Young-soo's hand resting on Farai's belly. The baby was active, rolling and kicking, and each movement made young Sue smile despite his injuries. "Have you thought about names?" he asked. "I like Thandiwe for a girl. It means beloved in my language." "Thandiwe," young Sue tested the name. "It's perfect. And for a boy? I thought you might want to choose a Korean name. How about something that works in both cultures? Something that represents both of us?" They talked until dawn, imagining their baby's future, making plans for a life they desperately hoped they'd be allowed to have. When they made love that morning, it was gentle and slow, their bodies moving together with practiced ease. Young Sue was careful of his injuries and her pregnancy, but the connection between them was as powerful as ever. "No matter what happens today," young Sue whispered afterward, "remember that you and this baby are the best things that ever happened to me. Stop talking like you're saying goodbye. I'm not. I'm just making sure you know." The representatives from the other families arrived at noon. Young Sue had set up the meeting in a neutral location, a warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle. He'd arranged for extra security around the house and made Farai promise not to leave. "I'll be back in 2 hours," he said, kissing her deeply. "Lock the doors behind me. Don't open them for anyone." But 20 minutes after young Sue left, Farai heard cars screeching up the driveway. Through the window, she saw 6 men in suits climbing out, and her blood ran cold. These weren't security. These were attackers. She grabbed her phone and called young Sue, but before he could answer, the front door exploded inward. Men rushed into the house, their guns drawn. Farai ran for the back door, but they were faster. "Where do you think you're going?" The leader grabbed her arm roughly, and Farai felt a sharp pain in her belly. "Please, I'm pregnant. Don't hurt my baby." "That's exactly the point, sweetheart. Your baby is the reason young Sue thinks he can defy the families. Once you're gone, he'll fall in line." They dragged her toward their car, and Farai fought despite the growing pain in her abdomen. She screamed, kicked, bit one man's hand hard enough to draw blood. But there were too many of them. Just as they were forcing her into the vehicle, gunshots rang out. Young Sue's security team had finally reacted, engaging the attackers in a fierce firefight. In the chaos, Farai broke free and ran back toward the house. Another car came screaming up the driveway. Young Sue jumped out before it fully stopped, his face a mask of rage and terror. He saw Farai and ran toward her. "Get down!" he shouted. But Farai couldn't move. The pain in her belly had become unbearable, and she looked down to see blood soaking through her dress. "Young Sue, something's wrong." He reached her just as her legs gave out, catching her in his arms. No, baby, stay with me." "It hurts," Farai gasped. "The baby. Something's wrong with the baby." Young Sue's face went white. He scooped her up, carrying her to his car while his men provided cover. Bullets flew around them, but he didn't slow down. He laid her in the back seat and drove like a man possessed toward the nearest hospital. "Hold on," he kept saying. "Please hold on, both of you, just hold on." Farai could feel wetness between her legs, could feel her body doing something it wasn't supposed to do for 3 more months. The contractions hit, hard and fast, and she screamed. "We're almost there," young Sue promised, tears streaming down his face. "Just a few more minutes." They burst into the emergency room, young Sue carrying Farai in his arms, both of them covered in blood. Nurses rushed forward with a gurney, and doctors immediately started examining her. "She's in premature labor," one doctor said. "At 7 months, the baby has a chance. But we need to operate now." "Save them," young Sue demanded. "Both of them. I don't care what it costs." They took Farai away, and young Sue was left standing in the hallway, covered in her blood, feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life. Daejing arrived with more security, barking orders, securing the hospital, but young Sue barely heard him. He'd failed. He'd promised to protect them, and he'd failed. Hours passed. Young Sue sat in the waiting room, his head in his hands, praying to gods he didn't believe in. Finally, a doctor emerged. "The baby is alive. A girl. She's very small, only 3 pounds, but she's fighting. We have her in the neonatal intensive care unit. And Farai, she's stable. The surgery went well. She lost a lot of blood, but she's strong. She's going to recover fully. Young Sue's legs nearly gave out with relief. Can I see them? The doctor led him first to Farai's room. She was pale, hooked up to various monitors, but her eyes opened when he entered. "The baby," she whispered. "She's alive. Our daughter is alive." Young Sue took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have protected you better. You saved us. If you hadn't come when you did." "Don't think about that." He pressed his forehead against hers. "Just focus on healing. Both of you are going to be fine." The doctor then took young Sue to see his daughter. She was so tiny, barely bigger than his hand, with tubes and wires attached to her small body. But she was alive, her tiny chest rising and falling, her miniature fingers curled into fists. "She's a fighter," the nurse said, "just like her parents." Young Sue pressed his hand against the glass of the incubator, unable to touch his daughter but needing to be as close as possible. Something broke inside him in that moment, and tears he'd been holding back for hours finally fell. This tiny human, this perfect little girl, was his, and he'd almost lost her before even meeting her. The violence of his world had nearly destroyed the only good things in his life. He pulled out his phone and called his father in Korea. When the old man answered, young Sue spoke in Korean, his voice hard. "I'm done. You can have Chicago, the businesses, the territory, everything. But you leave my family alone. You make sure every other family knows they're untouchable, or I'll burn everything down, including our family name." His father was silent for a long moment. "You'd give up everything for them?" "Yes." Another pause. Then, surprisingly, his father's voice softened. "I had a woman once before your mother, someone I truly loved. But I chose duty over her, and I've regretted it every day for 40 years. Don't make the same mistake I did, son. Choose love. Choose family." "You're giving me your blessing?" "I'm telling you that some things are more important than legacy and power. Your daughter deserves a father who's present, not one who's dead in a gang war." They talked for an hour, negotiating terms. Young Sue would give up all his territory and businesses in Chicago. In exchange, his father would use his influence to declare young Sue and his family off limits to all criminal organizations. Anyone who touched them would face the wrath of the entire Korean Mafia network. When young Sue hung up, he felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For 3 weeks, young Sue and Farai practically lived at the hospital. Farai recovered from her surgery, though she couldn't hold her daughter yet because of the strict sterile protocols in the NICU. Young Sue spent hours each day staring at his tiny daughter through the glass, watching her grow stronger bit by bit. Late at night, when Farai was sleeping, the nurses sometimes let young Sue into the NICU. He'd wash thoroughly and then sit beside his daughter's incubator, talking to her softly in Korean and English. "Your mother is the bravest person I know," he'd whisper, "and you're just like her. You came into this world fighting and you're not giving up. That's how I know you're mine." On those long nights when Farai was strong enough, young Sue would make love to her carefully in her hospital bed, finding comfort in each other's bodies during the terrifying waiting. They'd kiss to muffle their sounds, their hands desperate and seeking, reminding themselves that they were alive and together. Finally, after 3 weeks, their daughter was stable enough to hold. The nurse placed the tiny bundle in Farai's arms, and both parents cried. She was so small, but her eyes were alert, looking up at her mother with curiosity. "Hello, Thandiwe," Farai whispered. "We've been waiting to meet you." Young Sue wrapped his arms around both of them, and for the first time in weeks, he felt peace. His family was whole. They were alive, and he'd made sure they'd be safe. "I love you both," he said, "more than anything in this world." That night, with Thandiwe finally sleeping in her mother's arms, young Sue made a phone call to his contacts in Austin, Texas. It was time to start over completely, to build a life that had nothing to do with the Mafia, or violence, or danger. It was time to be the man his daughter deserved as a father. 1 year later, young Sue stood in the backyard of their modest house in Austin, watching Farai chase their daughter across the grass. Thandiwe had just learned to walk, and she toddled around on unsteady legs, laughing every time she fell down. "Be careful," Farai called, hovering nervously nearby. "Let her explore," young Sue said, smiling. "She's tougher than you think." Farai shot him a look. She was born 3 months early and spent the first month of her life in an incubator. "I'm allowed to be overprotective." Young Sue pulled his wife close, kissing her temple. Wife. The word still filled him with pride. They'd gotten married 3 months ago in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with just Dae-jung and one of Farai's nursing school classmates as witnesses. Nothing fancy, just 2 people making promises to love each other forever. Life in Austin was so different from Chicago. Young Sue's security business was thriving, providing protection services to legitimate clients who had no idea about his past. He employed former military and law enforcement, running everything legally and professionally. The money wasn't as much as he'd made in the Mafia, but it was clean, and he could sleep at night without worrying about raids or assassinations. Farai had graduated from her nursing program 2 months ago and was working part-time at a community health clinic. She loved helping people, especially immigrant families who struggled to navigate the American healthcare system. Young Sue watched her come alive at work, using her gifts to make a difference in people's lives. Thandiwe was thriving. She'd caught up developmentally despite her premature birth, and the doctors said she was perfectly healthy. She had young Sue's dark hair and sharp eyes, but Farai's warm skin tone and beautiful smile. She was learning words in both English and Korean, and she already had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "Appa!" Thandiwe called, using the Korean word for daddy. She held her arms up, and young Sue immediately scooped her up, making her giggle. "My beautiful girl," he said, kissing her chubby cheeks. "Are you having fun?" "Fun," Thandiwe repeated, clapping her hands. Life wasn't perfect. Young Sue still had nightmares about his old life sometimes, waking up in a cold sweat thinking someone was coming for his family. Farai still flinched when she heard loud noises, remembering the attack that almost took everything from them. Money was tighter than when young Sue had been a Mafia boss, and they had to budget carefully, but they were happy in a way that felt real and earned. Farai was enrolled in a continuing education program to eventually become a nurse practitioner. Young Sue had reconnected with his father, and the old man video called every week to see his granddaughter. He'd even invited them to visit Korea someday, promising to introduce them to family who had nothing to do with criminal activities. "Young Sue," Farai said suddenly, her voice nervous, "I need to tell you something." He looked up from playing with Thandiwe, immediately alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right." She took his free hand and placed it on her stomach. "I'm pregnant again." Young Sue's eyes widened. "You're sure?" "I took 3 tests this morning, all positive." He set Thandiwe down gently, then pulled Farai into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "We're having another baby!" Farai laughed, clinging to him. "You're happy." "Happy. I'm thrilled." He set her down and immediately dropped to his knees, pressing his face against her still, flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your big sister and I are very excited to meet you." Thandiwe toddled over, curious about what her parents were doing. She patted Farai's stomach with her small hand. "Baby?" "Yes, sweetheart," Farai said, tears streaming down her face. "There's a baby growing in Mama's belly. You're going to be a big sister." That evening, after putting Thandiwe to bed, young Sue and Farai sat together on their back deck, watching the sunset. The house wasn't as grand as young Sue's penthouse in Chicago had been, and the view wasn't as dramatic as the Seattle house overlooking the water, but it was theirs, paid for with honest money, filled with love and laughter. Do you ever miss it? Farai asked quietly. The power, the money, the respect people showed you out of fear? Young Soo thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. In that world, every problem had a violent solution. But no, I don't miss the life. I don't miss looking over my shoulder constantly. I don't miss knowing that any day could be my last. What do you miss? Nothing that matters more than what I have right here. He pulled her onto his lap, careful of her newly pregnant belly. You asked me once if I'd regret choosing you and Thandiwe over my old life. Do you remember? Yes. I want you to know, with absolute certainty, that I've never regretted it for a single second. You and our children are everything to me. This life, this simple, ordinary, beautiful life, is more than I ever dreamed I could have. Farai kissed him deeply, her hands framing his face. I love you so much. I love you, too. You saved me, Farai. Not just my body, but my soul. You showed me that I could be more than the broken, violent man I thought I was destined to be. They moved inside, checking on Thandiwe one more time before going to their bedroom. Young Soo made love to Farai slowly, reverently, his hands gentle on her body as he celebrated the new life growing inside her. You're even more beautiful pregnant, he whispered against her skin. Knowing my baby is inside you makes me feel so many things. Show me, Farai breathed, and he did, taking his time, bringing her to the edge again and again before finally letting them both tumble over together. Afterward, they lay tangled together, young Soo's hand resting protectively over her stomach. We should find out the gender this time, Farai said, so Thandiwe can help us prepare. Whatever you want. Young Soo kissed her shoulder. Boy or girl, healthy or not, this baby will be loved completely. Just like their sister. Just like their mother. Farai turned in his arms, studying his face in the moonlight streaming through their window. What are you thinking about? That first night. When I walked into that club and saw you dancing, I was so broken, so convinced I'd never feel anything again. And then there you were, and everything changed. The best mistake I ever made was taking that job at the club. Not a mistake. Fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it, we were always meant to find each other. 3 months later, they learned they were having a boy. Thandiwe was excited about having a baby brother, though she didn't fully understand what that meant. Young Soo started preparing another nursery, this time painting it blue with little clouds on the ceiling. Farai's pregnancy progressed normally this time, with none of the terror and drama that had marked Thandive's premature arrival. She glowed with health, her body knowing what to do, her confidence in Young Soo's protection absolute. They decided to name the baby Ji-ho, a Korean name meaning wisdom and goodness. Young Soo wanted his son to have a piece of his heritage, a connection to the culture he'd almost completely left behind. On Ji-ho's due date, Farai went into labor naturally. Young Soo drove her to the hospital, his hand holding hers the entire way. This time, there was no violence, no fear, just the normal anxiety of parents welcoming a new life. 8 hours later, Ji-ho was born, healthy and screaming at the top of his lungs. Young Soo cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. He's perfect, he whispered. Absolutely perfect. Farai watched her husband cradle their son, and her heart overflowed with love. This man, who'd once been known as one of Chicago's most feared criminals, was now crying over a baby, completely undone by the tiny human in his arms. Later, when Thandiwe came to meet her baby brother, she climbed carefully onto the hospital bed and peered at him with curiosity. He's so small. You were even smaller when you were born, Young Soo told her, but you grew big and strong, just like Ji-ho will. Thandiwe gently touched her brother's hand, and his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. I'll protect him, she announced seriously. We'll all protect each other, Farai said, pulling her daughter close. That's what families do. Young-soo looked at his wife, his daughter, and his newborn son, and felt complete in a way he'd never imagined possible. His past was full of violence and regrets, but his future was bright with love and possibility. That night, after visiting hours ended and it was just Young-soo and Farai with baby Ji-ho sleeping in his bassinet, they held each other close. "Thank you," Young-soo whispered. "For what?" "For taking a chance on a broken man in a strip club, for seeing past the violence to the person I could become, for giving me a family and a reason to be better." Farai cupped his face, her thumb brushing away a tear. "You were never broken. You just needed someone to remind you how to be whole." They kissed softly, a kiss full of promise and forever. Outside, the Austin sky was full of stars, each one a wish come true. And inside that hospital room, two people who'd found each other against all odds held tight to the family they'd built from nothing but love and hope. Young-soo had been right that first night. Farai wasn't his mistake. She was his miracle. And every day for the rest of his life, he'd wake up grateful for the woman who'd saved him, the children who'd given him purpose, and the second chance he'd never thought he deserved. Click like. If you believe in second chances and true love conquering all, share this story with someone who needs to believe in miracles, and subscribe to never miss another incredible love story that proves broken people can build beautiful things together.